She always arrived home by 9:30 on Thursdays. Sometimes a little earlier, but never later. Routine was her safeguard. At precisely 10:15, like clockwork, he would return from his lodge meeting. It had started as a favor to his father, who encouraged him to join, but over time, he found a sense of purpose within the lodge. He thrived in its civil service initiatives, excelling at organizing fundraisers and social events. His dedication earned him a seat on the Board of Governors, where he chaired the scholarship committee. Under his leadership, the lodge funded 2 community college scholarships each year, giving young people opportunities to succeed. She always ensured she was presentable when he returned. Often, she waited up for him, and they'd chat about the scholarship fund, their days, or the little things that married couples share before bed. Some nights they made love, but more often than not, they simply held each other, their bodies fitting together as seamlessly as their lives. But tonight, something felt off. As she pulled into the driveway, she noticed the garage was inaccessible. His car was parked askew, blocking both doors. Unease prickled her skin as she stepped out of her car. She had spoken to him only minutes earlier, and he knew she was on her way home. This house, their house, was her haven, though it hadn't always felt that way. Initially, she'd been reluctant to leave her cozy apartment for a suburban 3-bedroom, but he had convinced her when her lease ended. Over time, the house became theirs, a small yet dignified space with a wraparound porch that exuded charm. The porch swing, nestled beneath the ceiling fans, was a favorite spot where they often sat on warm summer evenings, swaying gently and talking about everything or nothing at all. She knew what he envisioned for their future. A family. And last month, while they worked together in the backyard, laying out a new flower bed, she'd surprised him with her own readiness. "Hey, you missed a spot," she teased, tossing a handful of soil at him. "No, I didn't," he replied, brushing off his shirt. "We still need to add the fertilizer and lime before we plant." "That's not what I mean," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I'm ready to have a baby." The realization had floored him. Literally. He dropped to the ground, pinning her beneath him with a joyful fervor. Their lovemaking that evening was slow, tender, more about an exchange of souls than passion. She had never felt so adored, especially when she saw his tears. He was always so composed, so steady, yet her words had touched something deep within him. Now, as she walked toward the house, she felt the weight of the night air pressing down on her. The porch light was off, but she spotted him sitting on the swing, a shadowy figure in the dimness. "Kenny," she gasped, startled. "You scared me. Let's go inside." "No," he said, his voice calm but heavy. "Stay here with me. Let's enjoy the breeze for a little while." He patted the spot beside him on the swing. She hesitated, then sat down. "Where were you? You said you'd be home, but you weren't here when I arrived." "I didn't feel like sleeping," he admitted, his words deliberate. He stood awkwardly, shifting his weight. "I realized I was almost out of gas and didn't want to deal with it in the morning. So, I drove to the corner market." Her brow furrowed. "There's barely a quarter tank in the car," she said softly. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken words, the night air carrying a tension that neither seemed ready to address. He took her hand firmly, his eyes searching hers for something. "Truth, maybe." "I could have sworn you just got back from the Hideaway Motel," he said softly, his voice even but laced with an undertone of pain. "Fifth Avenue. Room 69. "That's right, isn't it?" Her breath hitched. "Jerry's a little superstitious about these things," she admitted, her voice trembling. "Is that where you two meet every Thursday?" he pressed. "From 9 p.m. to 9 a.m.? She tried to pull her hand away, but he held it tighter, refusing to let her retreat into herself. His grip was firm, not threatening, but resolute. "Relax less," he said, his voice quieter now, almost soothing. "I'm not going to hurt you. But I need you to promise me something. Promise you'll listen to what I have to say without interrupting. When I'm done, it'll be your turn. I'll listen, I swear. But until then, just hear me out. Can you do that for me?" Her shoulders sagged, and she hunched over, her body folding into itself. A quiet sniff escaped her as she nodded reluctantly. "Good." He loosened his grip slightly, but his gaze remained locked on her as he continued, his voice measured and emotionless, though his face betrayed the storm raging within him. "When I first heard about it, I didn't want to believe it," he began. "One of your friends saw you. I don't know who. She sent me an email from a public account. I ignored it at first. But the thought took root. It grew, creeping into every crack in my mind until I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to know. He paused, taking a shaky breath. I asked a friend to check it out for me. He was house-sitting nearby. It wasn't easy asking him to do this. He's a good guy, and I think I might have ruined that friendship. But he did it. He saw you too. He even took pictures. Her head shot up, her eyes wide, but he silenced her with a gentle finger pressed against her lips. So, you promised to listen. She froze, her tears falling silently now. He continued. The pictures showed everything. You and him, going in and out of that motel room, laughing, kissing, goodbye kisses. His voice cracked slightly, but he pressed on. The look on my friend's face when he told me, I think it hurt him almost as much as it hurt me. He avoids me now. I don't blame him. It's probably hard to look at me without remembering that day. Her quiet sobs grew louder, but she didn't interrupt. When he showed me those pictures, he faltered, then forced himself to continue. I swear, Les, I could hear my heart shattering. The sound of it, it was deafening. But I needed to know why. Why did you do this? Why would you do this to us? He hesitated, his composure wavering. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, laced with betrayal. And Jerry, of all people, Jerry, your own sister's husband. Her breath caught, and she tried to speak, but he stopped her with a sharp look. You know what she gave up for you, don't you? When your mom died, she stepped in. She practically raised you. She was just a kid herself, only 15, but she gave up everything. Dates, dances, her own childhood, so you wouldn't have to suffer. She loved you like a daughter, Les. She still does. He ran a hand through his hair, his frustration palpable. She'll find out eventually, you know. But I'll never tell her. I love her too much to hurt her like that. Maybe she can forgive Jerry someday. She has the biggest heart of anyone I've ever met. But this... He shook his head. I don't know if anyone's heart is big enough for this. She broke then, her sobs racking her body as the weight of his words sank in. Memories of her sister's sacrifices flooded her mind, followed by the smug satisfaction she'd felt sneaking around. How childish it seemed now, how selfish. But deep down, she clung to a sliver of hope. He loved her. He always had. Surely he'd forgive her, as he always did. That belief had been her anchor, her excuse. Even now, as the truth unraveled around her, she thought she could fix it, somehow. He leaned back slightly, studying her. You know, he said, his voice quieter now, almost detached, I doubted myself for a long time. Thought maybe I was overthinking things. But then I found this. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small flashlight, placing it on the table between them. Remember this? The nifty little flashlight I gave you? It's also a voice recorder. Voice activated. Turns out, you two didn't have much of a spark. It was all mechanical. Let's get this over with so we can go home. One time, he even called it knocking back a quick piece. And you laughed. You agreed. His voice broke then, and he looked away, his mask of control slipping for the first time. The silence stretched, heavy with everything unsaid. If it meant so little. The room was silent save for the soft hum of a ceiling fan. Kenny's voice was low and steady, but it carried the weight of a storm. If it meant so little to both of you, why did you do it? He began, his eyes locking with hers. It gave me hope, Les. Hope that maybe, just maybe, it didn't matter enough to ruin us. I told myself that if it truly meant so little, it would end soon. And if it didn't, I'd still take the knowledge of your affair to my grave. Leslie swallowed hard, her breath shaky, but she couldn't find the words to interrupt him. I had a plan, you know, he continued, his tone tinged with bitter irony. I thought if I made it hard for you to meet him, you'd give up. I even found the tape recorder you hid in your purse. But then I did something stupid, Les. I listened to it. His voice cracked slightly as he confessed. I wanted to understand. I wanted to hear why. She looked away, guilt painting her face, but Kenny pressed on. I cried, Les, he admitted softly. I cried when I heard you say you were ready to have our baby. For a moment, I thought that meant your little fling was over, that it had run its course. But then I heard the rest of the tape. Leslie's face went pale, and her breathing grew shallow as he pressed a button on the recorder he'd been holding. Her voice, distorted but unmistakable, filled the room. Of course, you don't need to wait long to get me pregnant. I love him, and I want to make sure it's his. 2 weeks after the doctor confirms, you'll be with me again. We may have to see each other more often. All my friends say being pregnant turns you on all the time. Just be glad Kenny will be around to pick up the slack. The words echoed like a funeral dirge, marking the death of everything Kenny once believed in. Do you have any idea what went through my head when I heard that? He asked, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. Ugly things, Les. Evil things. I wanted to destroy you. I wanted to make him suffer. But eventually, I calmed down. I thought it through. And then I came up with the perfect plan. Leslie stared at him, wide-eyed and terrified. What plan? She whispered. Kenny's eyes hardened, and his voice dropped to an icy whisper. Revenge. But not the kind you're thinking. You see, it's simple. I'm leaving. From now on, there's no more Kenny and Leslie. It's just Kenny. The life we dreamed of? Gone. The daughters I wanted, because I thought the world needed more girls like you, will never exist. The son I hoped would have your grace and my strength? He'll never be born. His voice grew softer, but the pain was sharp in every word. No Lamaze classes. No late-night runs for cravings. No rubbing lotion on your belly to ease the stretch marks. No holding your hand as you bring a new life into the world. No first steps, no graduations, no weddings. You killed all of that, Les. You killed us as surely as if you'd held a gun to our heads and pulled the trigger. Tears glistened in his eyes as he stepped back. I'm done crying. Done feeling lost. Somewhere out there, there's a woman who deserves the love and loyalty I gave to you. I'll find her. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. Leslie reached out to grab his arm, her voice frantic. Wait. Please, Kenny, let me explain. Let me beg if I have to. He gently removed her hand, his expression unreadable. No, Les. I don't want your explanations. I don't want your excuses or your promises. We're done. She broke down, sobbing uncontrollably as he turned and walked away. Just before getting into his car, he paused. Without looking back, he said, Tell your family whatever you want. Just leave me out of it. And one more thing. Tell Jerry to stay the hell away from me. If I see him, I can't promise I'll control my anger. He got into his car and drove off, leaving Leslie sitting on the porch steps, her tears falling freely. The house, once full of dreams and laughter, felt impossibly empty now. Kenny was gone, and with him, the life they'd built together.